Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak Ruvain speaking to you from Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 24th day of the month of Nisan, 5781. It's the 6th of April, 2021. Today is 9 days, which are 1 week and 2 days of the Omer. Sfirat Omer, counting the Omer, 49 days. We begin the day after the first day of Passover, that is after the Seder night. The next evening, we begin to count the 49 days of the Omer, Torah commandment, and following those 49 days is the 50th day, which is Shavuot, the day that Israel received Torah at Mount Sinai. It's also the festival of bringing of the first fruits, but that's still a ways off. Today is 9 days. And if you've been counting, kol hakavod, good work. It's a fascinating mitzvah. The Omer has to do with the barley offering, which we made. We made the barley offering also on the 16th day of Nisan, the day after the first day of Passover. It's been 2 weeks since we've talked. Last week was Passover. You know what? I wasn't planning on it, but I guess I took a week off from Temple Talk because we didn't do a Temple Talk last week. By the way, even though I took the week off concerning Temple Talk, Rav Gedalia, who gives a Parashat Shavuot, who we video each week with the Torah study, didn't take the week off. In fact, he had a beautiful teaching about Shvi Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Passover, which is the day that Israel crossed the Sea of Reeds. So he has a beautiful teaching about miracles. And unfortunately, due to a very frustrating bug in software, we weren't able to edit and post his video on time last week. It wasn't edited and posted until yesterday. And it's live now on YouTube. I guess that's an oxymoron, live on YouTube. And it's a very, very beautiful teaching about miracles. So even though it was intended for the seventh day of Passover, it's any day. Every day is a good day for a miracle. And it gives a very interesting perspective on miracles, of course, inspired by the miracle of the splitting of the sea, which is the classic miracle of all time. And so we've crossed that sea, and we're on the other side now. We're on the far side from Egyptian bondage, and we're on the near side to the land of Israel and freedom and independence and the Torah. And right now, in terms of our Torah reading, we're in Parashat Shemini, which is the third parsha, the third reading of the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. Just before we get into that, I also want to mention there's so much to talk about. This coming Wednesday evening, Thursday, is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, which of course is a very, very personal day for the people of Israel here in the land of Israel. And next week, next Tuesday evening, Wednesday, is going to be Yom HaZikaron, Remembrance Day, Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers of Israel. Immediately followed by Wednesday evening, Thursday, Yom Atzma'ut, Independence Day. So we're in the middle of a very exciting time each year. The season kicks off with Passover, and we stay real busy. We're counting the Omer. We have all these days, some very sad days, some days of tremendous introspection and very solemn days, and then we have exceedingly joyful days. It's a real roller coaster. And all the while, we're counting the 49 days of the Omer. And what we're doing is preparing ourselves for receiving the Torah. And this is what Israel did in the desert, and this is what we do each year. Because each year, each day, we receive Torah anew. But each year, we also receive on an annual basis that Torah anew at Sinai. And we have to be prepared. When we left Egypt, we were slaves. We had no independence. We hadn't even tasted independence yet. The first taste, of course, was the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, done on the eve, at just moments before we left Egypt. So it took 50 days of growth for Israel, the nation, the infant nation, before they could stand at Sinai and receive the Torah. And we have to assume that in ourselves too, that we're totally unprepared. And you know what? We've been so busy getting ready for Passover that we had no time for anything else. Just like Israel was so ready, last minute things they had to do, the Pesach and the matzah and the bitter herbs and the blood on the door jamb, all that stuff before leaving Egypt. So too, we find ourselves in that same state of intense preparation before Passover. And so now we got to get ready in a spiritual way for the receiving of the Torah, and spiritual in terms of our own midot, of our own qualities, of who we are as people, our character, how we behave, how we relate to people, how we relate to HaShem, all these things that you need to work on. We need to work on them all the time. But we have this special 49 days of this organized national effort, because everybody counts the Omer together, but we each count it as individuals as well. We all have to improve ourselves in order to improve the whole. We count the Omer, and it's a mitzvah that we can say a blessing on, a bracha, each night that we count the Omer. But if we miss a night, we haven't done the commandment. We have to do it completely. So it's a 49-day intense commitment, once a day. It's very simple. It's very simple. You heard me say it before. We say it in Hebrew. It's very simple. You have to remember. And while you're remembering, it's a good idea to be working on your midot, considering your ways, and imagining the reality, which is that in X amount of days you're going to be standing at Mount Sinai, and God is going to be speaking directly to you and giving to you the Torah, the 10 Commandments, the whole deal at Sinai. You got to get ready. I got to get ready. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to get ready. Take advantage of it. Work with it. And there are so many tools online, things you can pick up in order to get into the whole mentality, consciousness of serious introspection and preparing for Sinai. Because we're really going to be there. It's not just something that happened long ago. It happens every year, every day. So this week's Parashat Shemini, the eighth day. But we never talked about Parashat Tzav, which was 2 weeks ago, because we read it before. It was the Shabbat immediately before Passover, and during Passover, and the final day of Passover, which was also Shabbat. We don't read the regular Parashat Shavuot. We read about the splitting of the sea, Kriyat Yam Suf. So Parashat Tzav we actually read 2 weeks ago, but we haven't had a chance to talk about. Parashat Tzav and this week's Parsha Shemini are greatly involved in the preparations and the opening ceremonies and offerings of the dedication of the Tabernacle, which was completed when we completed the book of Exodus. And for 6 months they built the Tabernacle, and now it's been set up and ready to go. So that's what we're talking about. There's a lot of technical things in Tzav, Parshat Tzav, about offerings. I'm not going to get into that, but I would like to read the first few verses, and because it has a very beautiful lesson. We talk about it each year, and especially as we're focusing on self-improvement, I think it brings to light two fine qualities. I'm going to read a couple verses in Hebrew and then into English. Now, again, we're back in Parashat Sav. It's from Leviticus chapter 6, verse 1. Vayedaber HaShem el Moshe lemor. Sav et Aharon ve'et banav lemor. Zot Torat ha'olah. Hi ha'olah al mokta al mizbeach kol halayla ad haboker. Ve'esh ha'mizbeach tukad bo. Okay, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, command Aharon and his sons, saying, this is the law of the burnt offering. It is the burnt offering that stays in flame on the altar all night until the morning, and the fire of the altar should be kept aflame on it. The Kohen should don his fitted linen tunic, and he shall don linen breeches on his flesh. He shall separate the ash of what the fire consumed of the burnt offering on the altar and place it next to the altar. He shall remove his garments and don other garments, and he shall remove the ash to the outside of the camp, to a pure place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it. It shall not be extinguished. And the Kohen should kindle wood upon it every morning. He shall prepare the burnt offering upon it, and shall cause the fats of the peace offerings to go up in smoke on it. A permanent fire shall remain aflame on the altar, and it shall not be extinguished. So we have this beautiful concept here, this commandment of cleaning up the ashes, the offerings kept on the altar all night long, burning all night long. The next morning, the Kohen wake, they put on their clothes, they wash their hands, their feet, they purify their hands and feet at the kior, nechoshet, at the copper laver, and they proceed to, with a special shovel, gather up the ashes from last night's fire and dispose of them properly. It's a whole process. But what they're doing is taking yesterday's offering and clearing way for today's offering. Yesterday's offerings that we make, our behavior, how we present ourselves to the world that God created, how we present ourselves to God and to our fellow creatures, that's in a way our offering. And how we perceive things, conceive of things, our ideas, our dreams, even our accomplishments, our achievements. What happened yesterday was yesterday. Very good, we hope. But we have to clear it off for today, because today's a new day. And then it goes on to say that the next step of the Kohen's duties is to rekindle the altar fire, to keep it aflame. It has to be aflame continually. So we need to clear out yesterday and then immediately light up today. Immediately make our offering. Be who we're going to be today. So those are two very beautiful, beautiful commandments which have as I believe, as their underlying meaning this concept of yesterday was yesterday, today is today. Every day has to be met with a new offering. Yesterday has to be cleaned up, and today has to be offered with all you got. Okay, so now I'm going to move right on to Parashat Shemini, which is this coming Shabbat's Torah reading. And it begins in Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1. Again in Hebrew, Vayihi bayom hashmini kara Moshe la'Aharon u'levanav u'leziknei Yisrael. It was on the 8th day Moshe summoned Aharon and his sons, the elders of Israel, and the elders of Israel. He said to Aharon, take for yourself a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, unblemished, and offer them before Hashem. And so on and so forth. He describes to Aharon a number of offerings, because this is it. This is the beginning. This is the inauguration. And these are the offerings of the inauguration of the Tabernacle, the Mishkan. Okay, this is the 8th day. Right? There were 7 days. If we recall, there are 7 days, what they call miluim, 7 days of practice, 7 days of training for the Kohanim to practice what they're supposed to do in the Mishkan, in the Tabernacle. And 7 days in which Moshe himself erected the tabernacle and took it down. assembled it, took it down again and again, once each day. And now we're there. The 8th day, which is really, really fascinating because the world was created in 6 days, and the 7th day God rested. And in that is what we consider to be a natural cycle, right? It's part of the way things are. The Shabbat, 7th day, but 7 days of creation, 6 days of creation, and 7 days of completion of that creation. And then all of a sudden we have this concept of an 8th day, which obviously is just the day after the 7th day, but we don't really have 8-day weeks. So it's almost like an additional day in creation. And of course, as we discussed a number of weeks ago when we were concluding the book of Exodus, and Israel was creating this tabernacle and putting it together, and then God's kavod, God's glory, filled it. This was in effect the final touch of on creation, because now God's inside, God's surrounds, God's beyond, but God now also has a place here in His creation. So this is the 8th day, as it were, and it's 8th in Yahadut, in Jewish thought. 8th always, the number 8 represents the supernatural, the above natural, spiritual. That's why we're circumcised on the 8th day. Think about it. And we have 7 weeks of 7 days each, counting the Omer. And then on the first day of the 8th week, or maybe the 8th day of the 7th week, is Shavuot. And that is an al tiv'i experience. That's a supernatural, above nature experience, obviously. So anyway, I just find that it's the 8th day. It's so significant. And so this is the day we've been waiting for. This is the day Hashem's been waiting for. And everything is going wonderfully. And Aharon is bringing all these offerings. You can read about the offerings on your own. And after he seems to have finished all the offerings, it says in chapter 9, verse 22, Leviticus, Aharon raised his hands toward the people and blessed them. Then he descended from having performed the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. Moshe and Aharon came to the tent of meeting, and they went out and blessed the people, and the glory of Hashem appeared to the entire people. Okay. The Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. This is it. We're going to read about it later also in the book of Numbers. That's when we're going to learn what it really is. But now this is really what he's doing. He's giving the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. Aharon is for the first time. This is on the 1st of Nisan. Right? This is all taking place on the 1st of Nisan. So Aharon blesses the people. As you know, just this past week during Passover, we had, for the first time in a year really, because last year it was only a handful of people because of the corona, but thousands of people gathered in the Western Wall Plaza for the public, whatever you want to call it, mass Birkat Kohanim. Anybody who was a Kohen was there also, and blessed the people with the priestly blessing, and done for the first time by Aharon in this week's Parashat Shemini. And then apparently, he and Moshe came out, and I guess they did it all over again. They also blessed the people. Imagine that, being blessed by Moshe and Aharon. All right, can it get any better than that? Well, just hold on. The next verse. Okay, so the continued verse, right? Moshe and Aharon came to the tent of meeting, and they went out and they blessed the people. And the glory of Hashem, kavod Hashem, appeared to the entire people. Wow, can it get any better than that? Yeah, it just did. And then a fire went forth from before Hashem and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering and the fats. The people saw and sang glad song and fell on their faces. this is a real high point right here in the history of humankind, I would say. It just happened, right? The people just got a flash of eternity. Hashem's glorious kavod literally filled the Mishkan. We talked about this. And again, we're in that same day still, the same day that we were at the end of the book of Exodus, and the same day that we were at the beginning of the book of Leviticus. We're doing some back and forth sometimes, but we're in the same day. And so this kavod fills up the tent of meeting, which of course means there's no room for anybody else but Hashem. And then, as we learned at the beginning of Vayikra in Leviticus, that Hashem then was mitztamtzem. He withdrew. He restrained himself so that there be a place for man inside his tabernacle, which is an incredible concept. There's a place for man and God in creation, and that's you got to think about that. This fire goes forth, right? I'm going to read this in the Hebrew. I just can't resist. ותצא אש מלפני השם ותאכל על המזבח את העולה ואת החלבים וירא כל העם וירונו ויפלו על פניהם וירונו. The people sang song. It's the utmost expression of total joy. We sang at the sea, right? Shirat Hayam. When we crossed the Sea of Reeds, we sang. And we were there. We saw God's glory there. And here the people see Kavod Hashem. They see this glory. I don't know really the right way to translate Kavod Hashem. His incredible presence was conceivable in some way, was received. And people sang. We don't have a recording of what they sang. We don't have a record of their words, or at least we don't know if we do. Or maybe there were no words. But there are many words in Hebrew to describe joy, happiness. And Yaron is also a name, means happiness. And it's a happiness that also means song. So the people fell on their faces. We have two ways of drawing near Hashem. One is ahava and one is yira'ah. One is love and one is awe. And we have to approach Hashem with a balance, because we love Hashem, but we have to understand also that Hashem's much bigger than us. Awe. And so the people fell, I think, on their faces. I think that was an expression of awe. Like, who can stand before this? You're gonna fall on your face, and then the song is the joy. So this hitchabrut, this connection at this moment in time, in space, with Hashem, just overtook the people. They fell on their faces and they sang with happiness. As so often, it seems in Judaism, it seems in Jewish life and tradition, there is profound changes in reality. We always talk about this when it comes to Yom HaZikaron and Yom Atzma'ut next week. Yom HaZikaron is the Memorial Day for Israel's fallen soldiers. Believe me, there is not a day in Israel that is more solemn than that day. It is a day observed, I can't say by everyone, but by everyone. And it's a solemn day, and it's a heavy day because it's so close, it's so personal. For some, much more so than for others. And then it goes immediately into Yom Atzma'ut, which is Independence Day, a day of, tremendous celebration and joy. And of course, there's obviously a connection between these 2 days. They can't be separated. And the gratitude that we have for our fallen soldiers is expressed in the joy that we feel on Yom Atzma'ut, on Independence Day. Here too, we were just describing this incredible moment in the life of humankind when the people fell on their faces and sang out of joy for what they were experiencing. And then the very next verse, the sons of Aharon, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan. They put fire in them and placed incense upon them. And they brought before HaShem an altar fire that he had not commanded them. A fire came forth from before HaShem and consumed them, and they died before HaShem. Moshe said to Aharon, of this did HaShem speak, saying, I will be sanctified through those who are nearest me. Thus I will be honored before the entire people. And Aharon was silent. So a moment after this unparalleled experience in human history, we have human error. Human error. That's all it was. Whether it was an act of hubris, whether they took too much upon themselves, whether they just got caught up. Everybody was ecstatic. They got caught up in it. Whatever it was that impelled Nadav and Avihu, it was human error. And of course that brought on a tragedy. So, and these are our lives. we have these incredible moments where we're with Hashem, and then we have human error, and we got to pick ourselves up again. And of course, Hashem says through Moshe to Aharon, what we just read: I will be sanctified through those who are nearest me. Thus, I will be honored before the entire people. It was as if Hashem is almost eulogizing Nadav and Avihu and saying they were the nearest to me. I've been sanctified. It's an incredible concept. But there was something very valiant and glorious in their error. There was something in their intention that, it seems to me, touched Hashem, as it were. And then we're told that Aharon was silent. And this is a very moving couple of words. In Hebrew, it's Vayidom Aharon. Vayidom Aharon, and Aharon was silent. And of course, what could Aharon say? But telling us that he was silent says so much. What a horrible moment for Aharon. And I hear from people about concerning Aharon. They say, the sin of the golden calf. Aharon kind of orchestrated that. And Moshe was actually very upset with Aharon for his involvement, but Aharon seemed to get away scot-free. unscathed. You know? He got away with it. But you know what? Aharon didn't get away with anything. I don't know if there's a connection between what happened with the golden calf and the death of Aaron's two eldest sons, but for Aharon it was a tragedy. And I think that Aharon had to bear that tragedy to his dying day. And, you know, it wasn't easy for Aharon. He was silent. And this is however you look at Nadav and Avihu, there's something here that's tragic and inexplicable. And we can't understand it either from human perspective or from an attempt at God's perspective. It was such a harsh decree. And so I understand also Aaron's silence as a proper response to something that is beyond our conception, beyond what we can bear. This coming Wednesday, evening Thursday, is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Day, around the world and in Israel. And Vayidom Aharon. It's unexplicable, it's unexplainable. The Holocaust, the ruthless murder of 6 million Jews, the destruction of worlds, of lives, of everything. Vayidom Aharon. There are things that can't be expressed because there's no expression for them. Just as Vayaronu was this great roar, this song of joy, of being totally connected with HaShem, being there. And Vayidom Aharon, which is coming from the loneliest place in the world. And a feeling of disconnect and silence. So we don't want to be there. The Torah Parsha continues with how they dealt with removing the bodies of Nadav and Aharon from the Tabernacle, and a few other incidents which happened on that day, and then closes with description of those animals which can be eaten and those which cannot. What we refer to today as the laws of kashrut. And of course, the certain animals which can be eaten, how they can be eaten, the animals which can't be eaten, fish, creatures from the sea, what can be eaten, what can't be eaten, insects. There is actually an insect that can be eaten, and so on and so forth. What birds can be eaten. We don't have much time, so I'm not going to get into the detail, but this almost seems to be an answer to what Nadav and Avihu were in search of, which was this moment of connection, this high. We want to just keep it going. Let's keep feeding the flame. Let's bring in this uncalled for incense offering. We don't need to do that, Torah seems to be telling us. There are ways to keep the connection. And yes, believe it or not, what we ingest, how we eat, a very mundane thing that we have to do every day, can be a vehicle for keeping this connection, keeping this high, keeping God's presence close to us. And that's through proper eating. And the laws of kashrut are all about proper eating. I hear the music. It's been great for me. I hope it's been okay for you. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.